everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to the Impact X Founders Series webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Eva Simpson. I'm a journalist and I'm also the founder of public relations company ESPR. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by someone who describes herself as an ordinary human being who had a very good start. But today's special guest, Ursula Burns, is far from ordinary. Ursula made history when she became the first and only Black woman to lead a Fortune 500 company when she was appointed CEO of Xerox, and that feat has never been matched. Ursula is formidable across multiple industries and household names, including technology with VEON and Uber, health with the Mayo Clinic, finance with American Express, the food industry with Nestle, education at MIT, philanthropy, the Ford Foundation and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and the arts with the New York City Ballet. And I'm exhausted just reading out that long list, Ursula, of all those incredible things that you are involved with. So we're thrilled that she's been able to join us. As you can imagine, she has one of the busiest schedules and diaries, but she's taken time out to join us today for a candid discussion on lasting impact and the sustainable strategies that European fast-growth communities can employ if they feel that they're encountering racism. So Ursula, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about the time. I'll just caution all of you that it should be interactive and fun. So let's start.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ursula. And today we're also joined by Eric Collins. So Eric is the CEO of Impact X, and both Eric and Ursula are founding members of the company. Now, as you may or may not know, one of our key things that we want to do at Impact X and what makes us unique is the ability to engage with you and bring together people and leaders in our network so that you can engage with them in an insightful and engaging way. So as Ursula has said, we want this to be as engaging as possible. So please ask as many questions as you can throughout. And you do that by hitting the Q&A button at the bottom of your screens. If you want to be anonymous, just put anon at the preceding your comments and we'll still take them, and that'll be engaging as well. So before we begin our discussion with Ursula, I'd like to turn to Eric and ask you, Eric, what you've been seeing in the market in recent months and weeks.
Thank you, Eva, and thanks everybody for joining. We are in extraordinary times, and instead of hearing platitudes, it's important to hear extraordinary voices who can actually help to guide us. Ursula Burns is one of those people, so I so look forward to hearing from Ursula and thank her in advance for everything she's going to say. So I wanted to look at sort of the environment in which our portfolio companies are dealing and which pipeline companies that are out there who are listening today are actually dealing also. Our portfolio companies are, as we've spoken about before, we probably have in our pipeline 700 companies. In our portfolio, we have 17 organizations to whom we've written checks. And our portfolio companies are moving now fully from the transition from survive to thrive. They've done during the survive phase, which was started, 13 weeks ago. They had to extend their runway. They availed themselves of resources of private and public means in order to make that happen. They prioritized and planned, so they used their time so they could come out of the situation, not limping, but running as fast as they can. And one of the keys is that all of these organizations have not been planning for the world that they left and the world that which would, in some ways, they think characterize the future world. They decided that the world was probably going to look a little different than it did pre versus post. And they have started to plan for that post world. And this is something that we're encouraging all entrepreneurs with whom we get in contact. Because as you know, lockdown is easing around the world. And executing on a real strategy around thriving, now is not the time to say, well, what does the world look like? We have to have given a hypothesis and predicted what it looks like, and then we can test that hypothesis and tweak it with our actions and execution plans. What they're all relying on, and I think what the most successful organizations that will come out of here are going to rely on, is on control of revenue as well as fundraising. They're going to try and increase the amount of control they have by emphasizing as much as they can, how do I raise money myself? What is the money that I am actually going to be able to generate via revenue? Because that's something I can control. And the question as to whether the capital markets follow me and believe what I say and value me the way that I'd like them to, it's a secondary question. It's a nice backstop, but many of my organizations are saying, and Impact X's organizations are saying, we've got to focus on the question of, can we bring in revenue? Can we perpetuate our own existence? And how do we actually do that in a new world? Those are just some of the thoughts, Eva, as I have been working with organizations and as my colleagues and I have been working through Impact X with our portfolio companies. That's what we've been focusing on.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Eric. And I know, Eric, that this week in particular, in the light of the Black Lives Matter protests globally, you've been having lots of conversations about investment and Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs. Can you tell us a bit about who you've been speaking to this week?
Well, I think my list pales as compared to Ursula's, but we've been on with Sky, we've been on Sky News, we've been Bloomberg, talking both on the radio side as well as the television side. We've spoken to the Times, the Sunday Times, as well as the Times of London. So we've spent a good deal of time with a number of media outlets, as well as we've been speaking with podcasts and others. And one of the things that they're all interested in is what we're going to do. Why are we where we are? And I have to be very clear with everyone that our major focus as Impact X is not to look at the problem and what I call polishing the problem, but instead to focus on what is a solution and how do we actually utilize this time to get us to the state that we want to be much more quickly. So that is where Impact X has actually been very much focused over in these conversations and over the entire time that we've been spending in lockdown and now sort of easing up.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, Eric, thank you for that really insightful picture. And without further ado, I'd like to turn to Ursula and begin our conversation. So Ursula, many thanks again for joining us today.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Happy to be here.
As an American who divides their time between the US, the UK and Europe, how strange is it for you to have left the States and to come to London to see scenes of mass protest? Why do you think those events from the US have resonated over here?
Because racism is global. The bad news about racism is that it is everywhere. It shows itself fairly consistently. The methods that it presents itself are fairly consistent. So, you know, Black Lives Matter or police brutality in the United States is police brutality in the UK, it's police brutality in Turkey, it's et cetera, et cetera. So I think that the reason why it resonates is because unfortunately we are all living in and experiencing the legacy and the breadth of racism.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think, as you say, that it's really connected with on the streets here. Have you seen there's been protests across the country? So you have been through some of the major economic, political and civil cycles over the past decades, the 2008 financial crash, Rodney King, civil rights as a child. And we seem to be living through all that in 2020 in the space of just a few months with the COVID-19 pandemic and the death of George Floyd. How do you see the impact of these events today as different from what has occurred in the past? Or is there any difference?
I think that there is a difference in what the opportunity is. I think that the events, unfortunately, you know, barring the pandemic, but the outcome of the pandemic would align with this as well, the events are not unique. They're not different. Yeah. Every year we have, every couple of months we have a police incursion into Black society that's violent, it's overwrought, that's illegal. We have that in the United States, we have that around the world. So that's not unique. And every time that happens, we have a whole set of protests around the world. Everybody gets out, makes their signs and marches. The difference now is that there is an opportunity for there to be a different outcome. Instead of there being temporary outrage, which is what generally happens, and, you know, a little bit of structural change at the edges, we have the opportunity of there being mass change. It probably won't be anywhere near as far as I want it to go or we need it to go, but I think it'll be a massive step from in the past. What do I mean and why? One is that we have this pandemic, right? So we've been living in this strange time where all we can do is sit in our houses and do our work and think. I mean, all you can do is what I call useful things with your brain. Hopefully you you do useful things and not just watch TV or whatever the heck people do it that's not useful. So the pandemic has forced us to change the way that we operate our lives on a day-to-day basis. Instead of running from pillar to post, we have to walk slowly from pillar to post, and we have to think about our environment. Second is the pandemic hit Black and brown people and poor people worse than anyone else. Death rates, economic impact, everything. Also, the requirement that they work. These brown and Black people and socioeconomically deprived people have suddenly become what we call necessary workers. They've become, they have become the heart of keeping all of the rich people going, getting your food delivered, checking you out at the store, going to the hospital and getting your gurney moved. All of these people who we ignored in the past, who what I call civil society ignored in the past, have now become urgently necessary. It's the second thing. And they're starting to understand the imbalance here. They have to go to work every day to take care of us. And we have to stay home to keep the world safe. It's kind of a little bit imbalanced. The third is that we have a very tone-deaf set of governments. One in the United States, I call the government in the United States more than tone-deaf. It's divisive, it's mercenary, and it's tone-deaf. And here, totally tone-deaf with Boris Johnson, doesn't have a clue what the heck he's doing or how he's planning. So we're seeing fundamental weakness in the governing structures of civil society. And then the final thing is literally businesses starting to say, maybe we have to look at things differently. We have to look at it differently already for the pandemic. But we have to look at it differently because our workers are getting a little bit more, my supply chain guys are working, the executives are at home. You have to look at it differently to actually include these guys. So I think all these things together, right? We literally have civil society that's just unrest driven by a pandemic. We literally have leadership that's absent. We have business that's saying maybe there's something that we can do differently or should do differently, not only pandemic driven, but Black Lives Matter different. And then we have George Floyd, who literally you can't avoid the fact that you can watch on TV a policeman killing a unarmed civilian. And that kind of comes all together. And now we have a chance of people saying, maybe it's not going to just be the young people. Maybe it's not going to just be the activists. Now, when you look at the marches that you see brown people, white people, Asian people, you see young people, you see old people. So maybe there is a chance that our ears are a little bit perked up to some new information.
So do you feel it has been a perfect storm? Because as you say, this is not the first time we've seen, in reference to George Floyd, an unarmed Black man being killed by police. We've seen what happened with Eric Garner. And as you say, there's an explosion, then it goes away. But do you feel, as you say, there's a perfect storm of the pandemic, we're all at home, and that happened, that's just triggered something across the world that may force through change after such a long time?
Yeah, that's what absolutely. I think, the United States is a different place than the UK. I've been living here for 2.5, 3 years, and I lived here before. The UK is a very obedient society. Very organized and very kind of complacent. The US is structurally disobedient. We run ourselves by states. We don't particularly like to listen to anybody. Everybody has their own. So the change will happen differently in the US than in the UK. But I think that we can grab the opportunity for change in the UK from the leadership or the uncomfort that we see in the US. And one of the reasons why Impact X is so important is that everybody on this call and all of the structure of Impact X is around Black and brown people. The entire idea here is that we have been waiting for years for people to help us, for people to take care of us, for the laws to change, for give us access to whatever the heck. We've been waiting, give us a better educational system, give us. And right now, I think that we still need some of that to happen. I mean, obviously, we're taxpayers, we're citizens. But we have to be more in front, and we have to literally, some of us have to be more in front and say, forget about the give me. We will enable for ourselves a future that's better. We cannot count on white society. We've been trying for 200 and 300 years. We cannot for white male society to take care of Black and brown society, to take care of female society. It just isn't going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of how we do get in front and using this opportunity to get in front and be part of the conversation. So Robert Smith in the New York Times this week, the richest Black man in America, talked about how he's been inundated with calls from people from corporate America trying to work out how they know, they recognize there's a problem, how they fix this. So how, Ursula, do we use this opportunity to get in front and get a seat at the table?
Eric said this earlier, that Robert's been inundated with every Black person that has any name that's known anywhere has been called by at least 10 CEOs. This is to me, this is kind of funny.
So your phone is ringing off the hook, Ursula?
Yeah, I literally, and by the way, one of the things that you do is not get snarly and not get impatient with them. Okay. The fact of the matter is, because my first reaction is, what the hell are you calling me for now?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had this problem forever. And now what? You feel a little guilty, but that's not the response that's going to be useful at all. The response that's useful is, if they call, they know. It's like if you're an alcoholic.
Was that your first response when you saw that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My first response is, really? I talk to you all the time. You know me. Now, because your company may become cornered, right? They don't have Black board directors. They don't have Black executives on their team. They don't even know about policing in civil society. They don't know about policing at all in this society. They have no idea who their supply chain workers are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact of the matter is, we shouldn't expect them to be any more insightful than they are. I am very happy that they are now insightful enough to know that they're not insightful. So they have to call. And so I literally love it. I was on the phone Monday or Sunday, days kind of go away, with the CEO of a large European sporting goods company. Really good guy. By the way, really good guy. He serves on the board with me. He is curious. He is trying to be, even before George Floyd, trying to be progressive. But he called to tell me that it's not natural. So he said basically—
Use that word, it's not natural.
It's not natural. He said basically, I know something is up here, and I know I should be doing something more or different.
Yes.
I need some help.
Wow.
I need help. But he's not the only one. Yesterday, I was on the head of a big financial institution, private equity institution, who basically said, I need you to give me names of people who I can put on my portfolio company boards that are Black. I said, so you just decided this yesterday, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
The fact of the matter is, like I said, you can't get snarly. I think this is what I'm feeling and hearing from businesses, that we are at a time, because governments are letting us down, because people are starting to become outraged by not only Black people, not only women, but the world is starting to become outraged by the treatment of people who have less. Yeah. They may have to kind of get in there. Eric.
So then in that case, so then how do we use this opportunity? You say we don't get snarly, we listen, but how do we make sure that we don't just give all this information and then how do we make sure we're part of meaningful conversations and change?
The first is to actually give all the information. I mean, one of the and follow up. I mean, like I said, I've gotten the number of names for, I need a Black director here. I need a Black. Literally give all the information and follow up. Ask, what do you do with the information, etc. The third is for this group is, I think Eric said it, is not to survive, but to use this chance, use this time where people are a little bit more sensitive to in their ear and in their hearts and in their minds. To actually thrive, to push the boundaries. By the way, if you're not going to make it, if it's not a good business, then basically it's going to go away. That we're not talking about those businesses. That's not the people on this call. But if you are good, you have to literally reach out. You have to take some chances. You have to look at the future, not like we look at the past. We have to actually use all of the people are willing to give money to Black people today.
Right.
More, at least verbally, more willing. Let's go. I mean, start pushing, and use the fact that you said this. If you encounter racism when you started speaking, Eva, I'm like, if they encounter racism, it's, you know, when you encounter racism, because it will absolutely happen, either consciously or subconsciously. People will approach you this way. Turn the tides, turn the ship. This is a point, to me, I've always said this, it's a point of strength, guys. We look the way we look, not by accident. We look differently, not by accident. God set us here with this brown skin for a reason. Right, so I think we should use it to our advantage.
May I ask a few questions, Eva? So, Ursula, obviously this is sensational and you've gotten lots and lots of questions. I'm going to give you sort of three and choose among them. I think they're somewhat related. So, and maybe you've already answered this first one. You have been asked to give advice to any number of groups. And those advice are generally groups that are headed by whites. What advice would you give to Black people as to what we need to be doing differently? Not in terms of necessarily our interaction at the advice giving level with whites, but just in general. Let me ask you another one. And so that's one question. As a Black entrepreneur, is racism something I should fight head on, or do I keep my head down and build a business and then use from that position of strength, use that to be able to be my platform? And then a final one is about, well, let me ask those two and then I'll group another set after that. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. What do you do differently? I think I talked about this a little bit. You know, obviously the advice thing is something that's useful and you should continue to do that, but you have to run your business from an opportunistic standpoint now. The world, even before George Floyd, the world literally got turned upside down. Who the heck knows what's going to happen in the next 9 months? You don't know, but neither does anyone else. I call the playing field is pretty level now, right? So we're all totally confused. We should absolutely manage from a point of strength, not from a point of weakness or a point of small size. We should literally use our size, our newness to actually help define the future, how businesses are going to be. I spend quite a bit of time talking to people in real estate, and they're all kind of struggling with whether we're going to have offices or not offices. I said, this is a great question for somebody who's running a business to try to figure this kind of thing out. Imagine, right? Imagine if you could actually get in front of this and have some, what I call the rework of the real world, right? This would be an amazing time for that thing. So I think what you do differently is what you have been doing multiplied and accentuated now, which is you stepped out already. You've already taken the step of not being dependent on someone else for your employment. You've taken the step of massive risk financially. Continue and push. And second, work together. I think this is another thing that always surprises me, is how we become so compartmentalized in our work. We become Black islands to other Black islands. So we're just islands floating together. We have to work together. That's one of the things I love about Impact X. We have to work together and help each other. If we design the system like the whites have designed it, we will fail. They'll beat us every single time. We have to coalesce and help each other, even if we have to be cooperation, right? We have to cooperate and help and compete at the same time. It's really important that we do that. We don't have size, we don't have scale. We have speed, we have brains, and we have a community that we should be able to pull together. Second point, I don't understand the question at all, Eric, about racism face on. I don't understand. People ask me this all the time. What do you mean? So if someone is a racist and are silly enough, a lot of them still are, to actually expose that to you, right? A lot of people try to basically, I would do the non-physical punch in the face immediately, right? You can't punch him in the face because that's against the law, but you literally, there is no way to put your head down in the face of racism. Not anymore, right? There was a time when the law protected people who did this. No longer. Even unless you're a policeman and then the law protects you, you literally have to, not only for yourself, but for every single person who's around you and the people who are coming behind you, you must face it head on. I am very vocal, but that doesn't mean, head on doesn't mean that you stop the meeting and scream. Head on means that you, in the way that you are the most effective from a change perspective, that you actually don't let it pass, but you use your tools and skills to make it clear that you are very aware of what's going on, and that behavior, those practices cannot continue, not with you around. So you have to face it head on.
Yeah. Ursula, but what would you say to people? I mean, that's fantastic advice, but a lot of people in a lot of corporate companies, for instance, they deal with a lot of microaggressions and they don't feel that they feel that if they speak out, they may be labeled a troublemaker. So in your career, how have you managed to speak out without alienating or potentially jeopardizing your position? Or do you speak out anyway and say to hell with the consequences? It's just the right thing to do. How do you sort of balance those two things?
Well, I actually don't worry too much about, I mean, I'm in a little different position in my career than most people on this phone, but I didn't really worry about alienating people, because I was recruited into my company to go do a job and to work. And my expectation is that they wanted me to be successful. They didn't want me to fail. Yeah. So I thought that they wanted me to speak up. And so I did.
Yeah.
So I never really approach it like, running away from. My husband would always say to me, whenever I would be I get emotional and very kind of riled up, he would say, Ursula, the worst that they can do is fire you, and then you have to find another job.
Yeah.
And that's the approach is that. Be careful though. I mean, this is, you can't be stupid sitting, you have to make sure that you play just like anything in your family, in the streets. You have to make sure that you play the game with strategy, right? You have to have a strategy here. But if you have continued incursions on your humanity, I think that I would hope that they would fire you if you don't quit. Because I mean, literally, because you can't live in an environment like that. So I think so I say to people out there, going to work, if going to work, all it means to you is the money, then find another job. Yeah. If you can't participate, if you cannot be yourself, if you cannot have some strength and some dignity, try to find another job. Become an Uber driver.
Yeah. Yeah.
May I ask a few more questions, Eva?
Yeah.
So Ursula, there are again, these questions keep coming in. And I want to put two more together. Should business play a bigger role in changing and embracing the new opportunity instead of waiting for government to fix it? That's question number one. So the role of business versus government. And we're seeing reactions from corporate America. This is from Landry. We're seeing reactions from corporate America. And yes, some might be just reactionary, but it's a start. What have we heard from corporate UK, and how do we get corporate UK engaged?
Yeah, so should business play a bigger role? The answer is absolutely yes. I did a piece was part of a piece in the New York Times and on BBC4 and on whatever the heck I hosted was out there, all about this. About for a long time, business has been able to hide behind the banner of my role is to create shareholder value. That's it. Don't ask me to understand anything else. I may pay a little bit of attention to the environment, but the rest of the stuff is not for me. That charade that whole veil has been taken down. That's bullshit. Business is made up of hundreds of thousands and millions of people. And we have to live, have education, get police services, get healthcare services in societies. And if when we walk into the business door, we have to be quiet and become part of this monolithic thing represented by a person who has no voice, then it's the most effective way to shut millions of people up, right? You walk in and you say, basically, you can't say anything. You can't have an opinion about abortion. You can't have an opinion about racism. You can't have an opinion about, so all of these CEOs who are representing millions and millions and millions of employees who are citizens basically have been silent. And I say it's the easiest job in the world. You don't have to have a point of view about anything, right? But then when we walk out, we have to make out our signs and marks. It's all bullshit. I think, it's all BS. I think that the fact of the matter is business must play a bigger role. Yeah. I don't think that they have to play a bigger role than government, but I think now they have to, because governments consistently are failing citizens. They are failing citizens. And they seem to not be able to move fast enough, to be aggressive enough, they have their own self-interest, whatever the reason. So we, the citizen part of business, has to fight with the citizen part of, has to coalesce with the citizen part of government and push government and business to change. The second question was
about UK business. So about UK business and how do we get them engaged, as opposed to we're seeing a lot from the US. How do we get UK?
I said this earlier, the UK is a little bit of an anomaly to me. But I'll say Europe in general, but the UK specifically. And I'm going to, I don't want to insult anyone, but this order and this order and I don't know, reverence that we have in the UK doesn't serve Black and brown people well. Yeah. I think that we have that because the order and reverence
class structure, isn't it, Ursula? The very class structure.
Very class structure. That class structure, by definition, excludes you. So if you revere it to the level that there seems to be a reverence to it, you actually are saying, I actually will accept the structures of that. It just doesn't really make sense, right? Because we know, just like America knows, just happens to be thousands of years younger than the US, than the UK. We know that that was built on the backs of people who are not represented, right? So you can't, so I just think that pushing hard. I remember when I first came to work in the UK in 1994, and I would ask questions. This is way before we had, like today, very aggressive movements for representation. I would ask questions like how many XYZs there are in the company. And they would say to me, it's illegal for them to track. They can only track women. I said, really? Yeah, I can count a woman, but I can also count a brown and Black person, right? We can just kind of go out and count them. So there's all these structures that have been designed and codified into like life here that makes it very difficult to break out in a very aggressive way. It doesn't make it impossible. I haven't been here long enough to figure out the way to break out. I know one way is to just remove yourself from the hands of these people totally. Yeah. And that's why Impact X is so important. I mean, when we design our own business, then we say, okay, fine, we're gonna run it the way we want to run it. But I think the other way is that you have to keep pushing back against these very historic structures that were built on inequality, illegality, on abuse, on destruction. We have to actually recognize, I get it, guys, and this is gonna be horrible, but I do have a lot of reverence for the Queen and the whole royalty, but by definition, that means that the literal ruling of this country will never, ever, ever have anything to do with people who look anything like us. Yeah. And the one chance we had, right, they basically summarily booted her and her. I
know where you're going with this one, yes.
My point is that, I mean, the Queen, I know it's kind of a figurehead, but think about it.
Yeah.
You say basically there's no way ever you can get there. And I just don't understand a structure like that. The United States of America, as bad as it is, and it is bad, actually has this fallacy that we can all work hard and maybe we can get there.
Yeah, it's more of a meritocracy. We're here.
Meritocracy.
It's just where you're born or the accident of birth or your DNA, that then in the UK still very much determines your future. So I think that's a very valid, it's a brilliant point you make, is that maybe we do give too much reverence to these class structures, and we need to think of other ways of enacting with those. I think, Eric, we've got a few more questions. Did you want to jump in?
We do have some questions, and I actually want to I also wanted to echo Ursula's comment that, quite frankly, what we do see at Impact X and what we would encourage people who are part of our pipeline in whom we haven't been able to invest yet, hopefully that's the case, that those individuals are creating that alternative structure that Ursula's talking about. That is by itself an act of defiance. It is an act of otherness. Now, the challenge sometimes happens that you run into the buzzsaw of where is your money going to come from? And Impact X has tried to, one of the things that we're trying to do, and we hope that you all are sort of watching this, is we've tried to show, go on our website at www.impactxcapital.com and look at who our founding members are. Founding members are people who've put money into our business. We spend a lot of time trying to find people, both sides of the Atlantic, France and as well as in the UK, who would actually say that this is something which is important to us. We are going to back you with risk capital. If immediately I run to the various names that you all know, if I run to Atomico, if I run to Balderton, if I run to Index, if I run to Octopus, if I run to Local Globe, none of those organizations have any Black partners to have a conversation with about your ideas. Now, they have very supportive organizations, but you do understand that there's something that's there in terms of the systemic elements of racism that then create a dynamic that's going to be somewhat hard. And if you want to have a conversation about your business, you're fighting against, as Ursula said, almost the queen. You're fighting against an entrenched system that's very hard to do. So if you're saying, I want to start a business and immediately I want to go to, Oxford or Cambridge to their endowment to get money, you've immediately run into the problem. So you've got to think about how you're going to position these things. Sorry to preach. Let me go into some questions for Ursula, which everyone wants to hear more of than from me. Ursula, as you sit on the board of Uber and a number of other large organizations, how are you addressing the lack of diversity within these organizations? And do you think they're doing enough? And again, Ursula, I'm going to ask another question. You get a shout out from PGA who says, love your energy, Ursula. Ursula, do you believe the issue of reparations will ever get up the agenda? And how could that impact corporate attitudes? So one wants to know about the boardrooms and what you're seeing in your sort of closed door sessions. And the other one wants to know, what do you think is going to happen in this conversation about, is there a way, truth and reconciliation, reparations, there are a whole number of topics that could be talked about in this sort of issue in terms of anti-racism. Can you take on some of those questions?
Yes. So diversity in the boardroom, I'm going to speak about it unfortunately from Europe and the US. ExxonMobil, Uber, what's the other one I'm on? Oh, Nestle. ExxonMobil and Uber are the discussions of diversity are front and center. Front and center. It is reported on at every board meeting, progress of the pipeline. We have a talent review every year. We beat the hell out of the people. It's slow. Both organizations have better diversity on the board than they do at the management team level, both organizations. But that's a start. It's not anywhere near enough. And by the way, and both organizations have diversity in hiring, so which is good, but nowhere near enough. They're getting better at understanding that it's just a buzzsaw that's going to come at them. As far as reparations go, I'm of two minds here. I think that Black society around the world has been wronged, really wronged. And I think that we deserve an apology. Absolutely. And I think that the apology will do more for the people who apologize than for us. And if that helps the people who apologize to right their minds about recognizing that there was a wrong for the people who are in this group, I'm fine with it. I don't depend on it. There's a whole bunch of discussions about it. I think we have to be really aware and clear that this is not, apologizing is not going to do a damn thing. Now, if they're going to pay money, I think that I would take it. Yeah. But this again is not going to solve any problems. They're not going to fit. We have structural, it has taken 600 years for this structure to be built. Think about this. Yeah. We have built a country in the UK, a country in the US. We built economic systems, educational systems, art systems that reparation and a couple of $100,000 is not going to fix that problem. Yeah. So I think that the good news about reparations is that it helps people. As my daughter always tells me, when you do something for somebody, it's more on you than it is on them. So I'm fine with that, and I'll take whatever money they have to give. But I wouldn't even get close to believing this is going to solve one bit of a problem for us. We have to activate for that to happen. Yeah.
May I put two more questions in front of Ursula quickly? Eva, do we have time?
Yes, sure. We have about 7 or so minutes.
Okay, Ursula, there are two more questions for you that are interesting and somewhat related. How can we start creating long-term systemic economic wealth collectively as Black professionals in the UK? And this is more a conversation about talent versus founders. People who are working as opposed to founding companies, and then working for others as opposed to founding companies. And then the other question is, we're hearing that private equity is finally more interested in investing in Black business. Is Impact X getting more interest from white investors? And if so, is it genuine? Which kind of goes to the conversation of, do you take money as reparations, and then what do you do? So those are two questions, Ursula, which I think are going to be the final two that we'll ask from here. And then Eva, back to you.
Yeah, the second one I'm going to start, but you have to answer, Eric, as the CEO. So I think that's best for you to answer. The first on wealth creation in the UK and how, I think the question is, how do we do it? I think that one of the things that's important is that we don't follow the traps and the examples that have been set up. We don't necessarily follow the traps or examples that have been set up by a biased white society. You know, and I'll say things like the following. I always love it when people say to me, well, that person went to Oxford, or that person went to Harvard. I go, okay. And those statements alone are checks as to their credibility and their capabilities. This is a white model. Oxford and Harvard are one way to validate one set of skills.
Yeah.
So I think that everything that we do as we start our own businesses has to be questioned if it's blindly modeled after white society. Because I mean, you know, my son went to XYZ, my daughter went to ABC, I went to, Eric went to, so okay, and these guys who went to Harvard and Princeton, you know, I don't know if that is the right basis. So please be expansive when you're looking at people to serve you, either partner in your supply chain, to work for you, to work with you, to literally, we have to start to break away from the old models. Asking for change and not doing it ourselves. So I think the best way to do it is literally look at all of your chain, and the best that you can, try to engage the broadest set of talent and put a heavy weight on the scale on talent that looks like you and talent that came, understanding that not all of the talented Black people went to Harvard, or not all of the talented Black people went to Oxford or Cambridge or whatever the hell. Actually, very, very few of them did. Absolutely. Expand yourself and start to break down some of these barriers. As far as PE and Black business, I think it's you, Eric, about the specifics for Impact X. But I think money is green, and I'm more concerned, it's not Black or white, I'm more concerned about the spirit and the true engagement and goals of the people than I am about the color of the person. So there are some white people who I know who I would call Black people. I mean, who literally hang and run and get it. And they understand, they get their things too, by the way, but they get our things, and I would absolutely very easily engage them in, and I do, some of them I do, I engage them in partnerships with me. And I think that from Impact X specifically, Eric can answer. I have to get off. Do I have to get off now?
We have a few more minutes to wrap up. So Eric, you could answer super in a few sentences.
I will answer very, very quickly. That you know, I think from this, Ursula, you have allowed me something that I didn't know that I needed. It sort of goes all the way to George Floyd. It's allowed me to exhale, and I'm sitting here saying that it's fascinating to listen to a person who's made it to the upper echelons of business, who has this sort of an audacious approach to opinion and presentation and is willing to share that generously with me and with this audience. It's phenomenal. In the comments, I get comment after comment about this. I haven't even read them to you. I'll show them to you later. So that's one of the things from this. Impact X is exactly following what Ursula said. The color of money, at least if you're American, greenbacks, we're talking about dollars, and we think of that as being green. But we have to be very, very careful. All money is not the same money. And quite frankly, we need money to be able to make sure that that money behind us is interested in pushing forward the same agenda that we are. So there's an infinite amount of money in the world. Lots of people might like to be tied to Impact X. That's fine, as long as they allow us to do what is important. And that is investing in underrepresented entrepreneurs to grow the next Amazon, to grow the next Google, to grow the next organization that's going to put a rocket to Mars. That's what we need to have happening. What we don't need is money which is going to come in and then try to change the approach and say that investing in underrepresented really doesn't give the same type of return. Investing in Black is not going to give us what you need, and I don't believe that's going to happen. We don't need that at the table. We need people who believe it's an army of the willing, a team of the willing, a community of the willing, not sort of dissent within that group, at least for now. There's time for that later. And certainly there are all sorts of funds that can actually invest with some other thesis than ours.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Eric. And thank you. I'm so sorry, guys. We have reached our time limit. That went so quickly. Actually, we had so many more questions to ask you and so many more comments. People are saying that they want this to be shared. Thank you for your energy. Thank you for taking the time to do this. This needs to be an annual event, someone said. So thank you so much for your insight. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
You're welcome. And thank you, Eric, for pushing me to do it. And I'll do it again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Ursula,
Please share this on impactxcapital.com. So until next time, please stay safe and goodbye.